Okay, so if you are going to work along with me, I would suggest that you come to this URL. Again, you'll find the URL in the description below, and you can clone this repository by clicking here, just copying that and pasting that into your terminal. And once you have that cloned on your machine, then you can cd into the root of the project, and there you can either run yarn or you can run npm install. That will install all the dependencies for you, and then you can run npm start or yarn start. Okay, once you do that, you should be able to see something like this. Okay, I'm not going to do that because I've already cloned the project on my machine and I've already got it running in my local browser. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier on, that we are going to be using this to-do backend. You can find solution in pretty much every technology out there. Some amazing work. What that really means is that, by the way, I'm going to be using the Laravel solution. Okay, so if we run the specs, it will, it does throw some error, but that's just ignore that. But if you were to copy this URL, paste it here in the browser, you should be able to see some to-dos, and that's all we need, right? If you want to see one of the to-dos, then you can basically click on that and you should be able to see a single to-do. Okay, so that's going to be our backend. Okay, now let's focus on what we have here. Okay, again, everything you will find, like the HTML template, in the app.js file, and the CSS should be in the app.css, and that's all we have right now. Okay, but what we want to do now is we want to create some components. So let's focus on the application itself and all the goodness of React. So looking at this, it seems like we've got this add to do, a form, right? And then we have this main sort of toggler, which basically toggles the status of all the to-dos. If you hover over a to-do, then you have got this delete button, or the cross, which basically deletes the to-do item. You can also toggle the status, and by the way, this is all static right now, but just going over what we have as in static HTML. And chances are that's how you basically would start with the project. Your front-end developer or probably your designer might have done some work and they would have given you a template and you just need to implement it, right? And you've got these filters and sort of a counter which kind of gives you information about how many to-dos are there for you to complete. Okay, so let's have a look at the project. So we can see that we've got a component here and just an input element there, which is going to be used for creating a new to-do. Then we have this, probably a component in itself for toggling all the to-dos and then showing the to-dos. Then we've got a footer, which basically here is the counter, and these are the filters. Okay, so let's start by extracting these things out. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create a component, and probably this would be called as add new to-do.js. Okay, I've got this handy extension which helps me in creating the boilerplate for a component. So if I go ahead and do that, so that will now create a functional component. Okay, so I'm going to call this add new to do. Okay, and this way is also fine, but I like to use sort of the newer way of doing things. Okay, so that's pretty much the same. So before it was a function, we were exporting that out, right? Now we're just assigning the function to a constant and then exporting the constant. Okay, that's pretty much what it is. So let's bring this, strictly speaking, I should really be just bringing this input, right, and leave this markup here. In fact, I think this is what I will do. or you can just bring the whole header to the add new component. But I would suggest to be mindful, because once you have like lots of components, then the component itself should really tell you what it is all about. Okay, so if I bring the header component here, that means, you know, the whole markup comes here, even though that it clearly tells me that add new to do component is only responsible for creating a new component. So there's no point for me to bring the whole thing here. So what I'll do, I'll just paste this input here, save that, come back to the app.js, and a couple of things. So first thing is that we need to import. So let me see if my editor starts working, so I can import the React from React. Okay, and then I can import the add new to do. Okay, and then if I come here and add new to do here as a component, and hopefully if I go back to the browser, yeah, no, it's exactly the same. But now we've extracted this out to its own component, right? Okay, let's do this exactly same thing with the toggler. Okay, so I am going to cut that out, and I will call this, what should we call it? We will call this probably toggle.js, right? And then again, let's make it a functional component, and toggle is fine. Then I will just paste the markup here. Okay. But if you come back, you know, something I want you to notice is that if you go back to the app.js, right, and let me go back one step. See, we don't have this additional div here, right? And we want to stay as close to the actual markup as much as we can. So if and the React basically will complain if you don't have you know, a wrapping div or another sort of element which can wrap two sibling elements. So if you look here, these are like siblings, and we need to encapsulate it or wrap it in some sort of element. So yeah, this would be one way of doing it, but that means that I'm gonna end up with the additional markup of div. So for situations like this, you can actually use fragment, right, which React gives you, or you can actually, this has been sort of, or I would imagine this is so common that the React actually introduced these sort of empty markups which treated as fragments. Okay, so that means that now I don't have to have this additional markup. I can have markup which closely matches to what I receive from the front-end developer or from the HTML template. Okay, so I'll just reformat that a tad bit and then save that out. Let's go back to our app.js and let's import that component. So I think we called it toggle. Yep, and this will become our toggle component. Okay, now if I go back, everything is the same. That's good. Okay, so seems like now we need to get this component out, right? And this is basically the list of to-dos. So let's create a new component, and I'm going to call it as to-do list.js. Okay, let me go ahead and copy, or in fact cut this whole section out from here, and we will paste it in the to-do list. So let me create a functional component. Okay, and let me just add it here. Yep. So we've got this wrapping UL element, that's perfectly fine. And I will just quickly change it to ES16 syntax or the ES15. I am not too sure, to be honest, but yeah, and this needs to be a constant. Okay, and there we go. So we've got the to-do list component, and I think we need to go back here, import that to-do list. Okay, and then just add this component here, and we should hopefully have the same result, and we do. Okay, great. So I'm going to do the same for this. So we've got filters and the to-do count, but what I'm going to do is, rather than creating components for each of them, I am going to just take all of it and create a footer component, because yeah, that's going to be easier, right? I mean, by now we should have a good understanding how to extract out the components and stuff, so I'm just going to be lazy and create a footer component. Okay, come back here and extract that out. Go back to the footer, import React from React, and then const footer is equal to a function which basically return some JSX. One of the things you might ask, that why do we need to import React here? Like, why do we need it? Well, we need it because we are returning a JSX here, right? So for that reason, we need the React here, so that once this is being exported, then the JSX can be treated accordingly, right? So I'm going to export default, and that's going to be a footer. Okay, so let me just reformat the code a little, and let's see that our wrapping div, yeah, that's fine. And go back here, import footer, and let me include it here. Okay, if we go back, yeah, everything is the same. Great. So we basically extracted out all these components, and that looks much more neater. I mean, we could do with sort of extracting the header out, and that would have made it a lot more tidier, but that's okay, we can live with that. So let's now move on to state. At the moment, we only have one to-do item, which is hard-coded, right? And what we should be able to do, or what we really want to do, is that we want to be able to pass some dynamic to-do items, and we want them to be rendered. We know that ultimately we are going to be retrieving these to-do items from the API, but for now we are going to pass some hard-coded to-do items from here as props down to the different components and see how the props work.